There are no limits. There are no red lines. Ukraine uses whatever weapons it has, including, by the way, British drones, and Storm Shadow cruise missiles, which they've used for a long time, to attack targets in Russia.
I'm joined by Michael Evans, former defence editor at The Times, with me here in the studio. Hello, Mike.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. So, look, Tony Blair and Jared Kushner have been in talks with Hamas in an attempt to get the stalled Gaza peace plan moving again. Hamas says it's prepared to disarm, but Israel is refusing to move unless it actually sees that happening. Look, during the war in Gaza, we know early on in the war in Gaza, in fact, Israel assassinated huge swathes of Hamas's top brass. Who's left? What do we know about them?
Well, we have this new guy called Khalil al-Hayya, and he's their political leader. He seems to have stepped forward with the idea that things have to be moved forward, reasonably rapidly. But I don't think he necessarily presents a sort of new face, as it were. I think he's been around a long time. He's been one of the negotiators before. So I think they're playing a fairly clever game, which is they are putting all the emphasis on Israel, that we, Hamas, will disarm as part of the agreement which we signed up to. But we're not going to do that until Israel agrees to withdraw their troops. So we're presented with the usual sort of impasse. And right now, the emphasis is on Benjamin Netanyahu, who's meeting, as you say, with Jared Kushner and with Tony Blair.
Should we assume that Hamas is still a significant military force? Because, if Israel's been doing anything the past, 2 years, one would assume they can't be much of a military force still.
I think that's partly right. But I think, when you suggest that Hamas is now no longer a sort of military-type organisation, it doesn't have any arms left, it's a fairly useless force. No, I think that would be probably unwise. They've kept quite a number of their arms, including some what they call heavy weapons. We're talking about anti-tank missiles mostly. But of course, they've been their leadership has been completely destroyed, and they've had to replace them all with new leaders. So I think they are very much a diminished force, but they have sufficient clout, shall we say, within themselves and within the population of Gaza to continue to stand as a force, not necessarily a significant force, but significant enough to confront Israel.
And what can Blair and Kushner realistically offer Hamas? Will it be about offering things to Gaza, reconstruction for Gaza, money for Gaza, aid for Gaza, or will it be about actually finding these leaders themselves and offering to ensure their safety, enrich them, that sort of thing?
I think it's more the former. I think, the plan under this great Trump vision is for Gaza to be rebuilt and for the population to receive, decent housing and particularly aid, etc. So I think they'll focus on that. But, of course, during the talks in Egypt, I have no doubt that Hamas will have raised the point about, what is the point of doing this unless Israel plays its part, and that's why the two envoys are currently in Jerusalem.
Let's cross the world. Russia and Ukraine have been exchanging another huge wave of drone and missile attacks. Strikes have been reaching further and further into each other's territory. NATO has also had to shoot down drones that have crossed into Allied airspace. Look, Ukraine is now hitting further and further inside Russia. How far can it realistically take that strategy? It's basically everywhere in Russia at risk of Ukrainian strikes now.
Well, not everywhere, but it's not that long ago, let's say 2 years, when the very thought of Ukraine launching long-range missiles, drones into Russia was not only, it wasn't happening, but it was frowned upon by the then Joe Biden government, who said, please don't do any such thing because, by the way, you're using our weapon systems and we don't want them going over the border into Russia because we're scared of what Russia might do. All that's gone. Now there are no limits, there are no red lines. Ukraine uses whatever weapons it has, including, by the way, British drones, and Storm Shadow cruise missiles, which they've used for a long time, to attack targets in Russia. Putin has got a different challenge. He now has an enemy who is prepared without any limits to target as far into Russia as they can. And we know that they've targeted not Red Square, but they've got into the outskirts of the Moscow region, and one assumes they're developing drones in particular, which will go right bang into Moscow at some point. This is what I think we have to face in the future.
The use of British-made drones being used for these long-range strikes. What are the implications of that? Should we be telling them not to do that? Are we glad they're doing that? Does that put us at risk of retaliation from Moscow?
Again, I think the psychology has completely changed. There would have been a period where certainly the British government would have been wary of having the British label on a missile heading off towards Russia. I don't think that counts anymore. I think everyone accepts that whatever missiles we provide, we the Brits and other countries, they can use them in whichever way they want. Yes, of course, there is the danger, if you like, that Putin might start saying, and he has said it, you're supplying weapons that are hitting my country, therefore you are open to missile threats or whatever other threats yourselves. That is a threat any British government will have to take seriously. But at this stage, I think we're apart from cyber warfare, which happens pretty well every day against this country, there is no sign, thank goodness, of Putin actually using military action against his country. I think it's most unlikely.
But there have been, I think, 2 days in a row, there have been drones entering NATO airspace. Should we assume that's happening on purpose?
I think everything's on purpose. Mind you, any piece of military kit can go wrong, and it is possible that it was aimed at somewhere, in Ukraine, and it hopped over the border. Personally, I don't believe that. I think, every time these things happen, we've had a lot of them, including aircraft. Putin is trying to see what NATO will do, how its defensive systems work. Yeah. And that's what he's up to.
Sure. Okay, look, and then crossing the world again, Donald Trump, he's ordered a major cut in US-South Korean military exercises, saying they're too expensive and could damage his relationship with Kim Jong-un. South Korea says the drills will go ahead, but the move raises questions about America's long-term commitment to defending its ally. Give us some background here, Mike. How dependent is South Korea on the US military for its defence?
Totally. First of all, despite what Trump says, there are 28,500 American troops in South Korea. That is a major deterrent, if you like. And of course, they receive money, they receive help with their military equipment, and then every year they have these exercises which are aimed at, not aggressively against North Korea, but aimed at deterring North Korea from any action in South Korea. So yes, the US partnership, which has been going for years and years and years, is absolutely crucial. I mean, I don't know, this announcement by Trump seems to have come a little bit late. The exercises actually are due to start today. 18,000 South Korean troops will be involved, and probably a large proportion of the 28,500 American troops will be involved. I think it's a little bit late to suddenly throw out the blueprint for the planning exercise. But no doubt Pete Hegseth, the Defense or War Secretary, American one, will no doubt make some plans or some alterations which will show that they've cut back. But I think it's really more rhetoric than actually practical on the ground.
So North Korea, we know North Korea is active in the war in Ukraine. It's been helping Russia with weapons and troops as well. But we also, talks have in the past broken down between the US and North Korea. What are the hopes of those talks beginning? What would Kim Jong-un want in return for restarting talks with the US?
I mean, personally, I would have thought that there's absolutely no chance of the talks happening. We've had, Trump's been in his second term for some considerable time. There's been, as far as I'm aware, no particular effort to have another meeting with Kim Jong-un. There's clearly no point in having a meeting if it's going to end up as the previous three did, which ended up with nothing. But Donald Trump has this thing about Kim Jong-un. He thinks that he's a friend. And he thinks, by the way, it's important in the power game for the White House and Pyongyang to have a relationship and the potential, at least, for meeting up again. And I think Trump likes to renew this and to remind the world that he and the North Korean leader have met, they have shaken hands, and he has got what he thinks is a relationship with him, and he doesn't want to part with that. So I think the timing of this exercise thing is all about that, is about saying to Kim Jong-un, look, we're on your side. We want relations to be good, and I'm going to cut these military exercises so we don't upset you too much.
Reassuring noises at the right time. Michael Evans, thank you very much indeed. Mike is, of course, a former defence editor at The Times. Good to have you here, as always.